Welcome to the American Security Council Protecting Our Freedoms podcast. The mission of the American Security Council is to educate and engage American citizens on national security matters, economic security matters, and the need for moral leadership in the United States of America. Please enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Protecting Our Freedoms podcast. I am your host, Joy Botterbeck. Today's podcast is the second in a series of Education in Crisis, featuring Dr. Karen Hiltz. Karen, it's good to have you back.
Thank you for having me back.
In our first series, Karen explained critical race theory and its implications, as well as other keywords used in school curriculum. So today, Karen's going to give us an update on critical race theory, and we're also going to discuss other materials that are being used or pushed in curriculum in our schools. And then finally, we are going to discuss this new Delta variant and its impacts on this fall's school closures and possible mask mandates. You can find Karen's latest article on our website at www.ascf.us under position papers. And while you're there, if you would donate or become a member today, we can certainly use donations to help our programs continue. We can accept major credit cards, PayPal, and cryptocurrency. We have a new offer. If you donate $25 or more, you'll receive a free copy of Mark Levin's book called American Marxism. Karen, since our last episode, there appears to be numerous school boards across the nation, from Virginia to Dallas, where they're drawing large crowds who are upset about the CRT and the curriculum that's being taught to their children. Mm-hmm. Can you give us some updates on critical race theory since the last time we talked, and who you think is winning at these school board meetings?
Well, thank you again, Joy, for having me. With regards to critical race theory, the battle continues, I'll say. There's still a fight among legislatures, among school boards, and among Department of Education, State Department of Education entities as well. And there's this continual dialogue between, is critical race theory good or is critical race theory bad? And of course, obviously, it depends on what side of the fence that you want to stand on. But the bottom line is that this should not be a political partisan issue. What parents expect, and myself being a parent and a grandparent, what parents expect from an education system for their children is for them to be taught facts, figures, obtain knowledge that helps them be successful once they finish their K-12 education, whether they go into the workforce or whether they go on to college. And what critical race theory does from my perspective is that it continues to divide, because it looks at race, black and brown versus white is typically how it's phrased, presented, oppressor, oppressed. It looks at your culture. It divides our culture, and in the United States we should be looking at the American culture, not cultures, and not that cultures from around the world aren't good to understand, but from a K-12 perspective, it's important for them to get a firm grounding on the foundation of the United States of America and why the United States of America is unique, and we need to preserve it. So the battle, as I said, the battle still continues. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, because and even with the legislation and the rules and the executive orders and things that are out there, until parents feel comfortable that the education that their children are receiving are based on knowledge and facts and skills that help them succeed after K-12 education, that is the real thrust, I think, behind this. So, and I do believe that parents are winning some of the battles that school boards they're challenging school boards. They're making those public record requests, or FOIAs, Freedom of Information Act request, depending on where you live. It depends on what it's called and stuff. But they're doing that so that they can have transparency, so they can see and understand and comprehend what their children are being taught. So I think because parents are becoming more and more involved, that is forcing transparency. So
that's good. And on our last podcast, we did encourage parents to get involved in school board meetings and know what their children are being taught in their curriculum.
That's right.
Then let's move on to also, I have been reading a little about Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which reads, "No person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or actively receiving federal financial assistance." In your opinion, Karen, is CRT even legal?
Well, there's some well-known scholars and legal groups out there who are publicly starting to come out and challenge some of the efforts to interject the critical race theory. And remember, this is a theory, okay? These are theories based on Marxism. And whether they are constitutional, and if you just logically sit down and read through what critical race theory is actually saying, and again, you won't see critical race theory in the curriculum. You'll see the culturally responsive teaching, you'll see action civics, you'll see social and emotional learning, you'll see people of color, POC, you'll read things like that. And those are elements of this, what I consider this whole umbrella of critical race theory. And it is divisive. It does put us in boxes. It continues to want to hyphenate Americans. It continues to talk about African Americans and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans rather than having us be identified as a culture of Americans, which is what our founding fathers expected, and our early education, that's what they promoted, is a common language so that we would understand what the founding fathers expected from us and how to be a good citizen, what they defined as a good citizen, and be representative. Because remember, it's we the people who have the authority within our country, not a government, not a group, not a union, but it's we the people. So yes, I do believe that we will find in the end, or fairly shortly anyway, that this is unconstitutional. So
too, and those other words you used that we had discussed last time, that they're sneaking in there to make it sound a little softer. Instead of, you may not hear critical race theory, but other words that Karen discussed. And there is other organizations and other that are pushing curriculum as well, such as Black Lives Matter Foundation. Back in February, I was reading an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer stating that first graders were encouraged to sing Black Lives Matter lyrics in their social studies class. They are also being taught BLM material through, I thought this was interesting, Sesame Street videos. Black Lives Matter Sesame Street videos. The article does say that teaching this BLM material is not mandatory. However, it seems to me that if you're not teaching, the teachers probably feel pressured to teach it or be considered a racist. And what are your thoughts on the BLM material and the pressure to teach?
Well, when I was sitting on a public school board, I had teachers come up to me and tell me that they were concerned about something that was part of the curriculum or part of the agenda of the administration, which is the superintendent and central office as well as principals. And they were concerned about teaching this to children, something to children, because I didn't deal with critical race theory when I was on the school board, but we did deal with gender bathrooms, and that kind of stuff started coming into the school boards at that time. And teachers were concerned from the perspective that if they didn't do what the administration instructed them to do, then they would lose their job. And remember, in a lot of counties, districts, school districts, counties, however they're identified, they are typically, more often than not, they are the largest employer in that county. And this does have an impact on the way teachers think, and it does fuel their fears to some degree in that, well, if I don't teach what the administration is telling us to teach, then yes, they do fear losing their jobs. And if they don't teach what the administration is telling them to teach, which is what the state is telling them to teach, which is what the unions are telling them to teach, then it's a trickle-down effect, and it does have it not only has a negative impact with regards to how teachers teach, but the morale, the culture of the organization, it can be impacted as well. So it's broader than just what curriculum do I teach as a teacher. It also impacts obviously what the students are learning, and then how they relate to their parents, and then how they grow up to become citizens. So this isn't just a instant at the moment concern. This is a long-term concern. So those are some of my thoughts with regards to teachers, and maybe a little bit of insight with regards to their perspective and my previous conversations with teachers. So.
And just to be clear, when we're talking Black Lives Matter, like the co-founders that claim to be the Marxists and have other agendas that I understand that's just not racism, but also affirming queer and transgender as normal.
Yes. And another thing with regards to, let's talk specifically Black Lives Matters, is that one of the co-founders recently has resigned from the organization because it's been in the news. The media has freely identified this information, that she has bought several homes, and so those homes are worth millions of dollars, while local state chapters have kind of, the lights kind of been turned on, and it's like, well, you're getting all this money for donations. Why aren't you helping our chapter in New York or in Ohio or in Wisconsin? Or, so they're seeing the hypocrisy themselves. And some of them are even starting to back away from supporting Black Lives Matter. So,
in fact, that article said that they made $18,000 off of the Sesame Street Black Lives Matter video.
18,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think we will continue to see the same fight against BLM-backed material as we are with the CRT material in school board meetings?
Well, to me, it's all lumped in, because critical, like I said, critical race theory to me is the umbrella. Not everybody views it the same way as I do, and that's fine. But I believe that all these other theories, and you've probably heard of the 1619 Project, and BLM is just a continuation of some of these other theories. Actually, some organizations have risen up, have formed and risen up because of the 1619 Project and critical race theory and social emotional learning. I mean, there's a whole cottage industry now. And I should say it hasn't just occurred, let me step back, but for several years, a cottage industry started developing with regards to social and emotional learning, and how that has been hijacked, confiscated by the Marxist believers, and how they have skewed what is actually being taught and discussed with regards to social and emotional learning. So a little bit more food for thought there.
Well, and let's move into now currently, at least my daughter has started back to school today, so most kids are going back to school either this week, the following week, or very shortly. And right now we have seen a rise in the coronavirus, likely due to this Delta variant. Karen, how do you think this is going to affect schools this fall?
Well, that's such a broad thing to discuss right now. Let's talk about in the state of Florida.
Yes.
Okay, this is where we're located physically. And Governor DeSantis has been doing some things with regards to issuing executive orders and having the Department of Education work with the Department of Health in the state of Florida to deal with and grapple with some of these issues. He has been demonized, called all kinds of things in the media for doing what's right. Now, I guess let's go back to the end of June when he signed the Parental Bill of Rights Act, which in essence kind of brought some things in the statutes together in a more concentrated location so that it would be more comprehensive and understandable by parents, the statute itself. And then it also it provided language to ensure that parents are the ultimate authority when it comes to the health and education of their child. Now, we keep being told different things by the CDC when it comes to the virus, and let me emphasize that this is a virus, not a disease, and that it affects older people differently than it affects younger people. When they came out with the vaccine, remember it was under an emergency order, and that it was not to be given to everybody because there again, it's an emergency order. And so Governor DeSantis, to his credit, focused on those who at the time we were told had the greatest negative impact to this virus, and that's the elderly. Mm-hmm. So he focused on allowing senior citizens to choose whether to take the vaccine or not. There again, it's been the current administration has brought that vaccine opportunity down to 12 and above now, and still people are choosing not to take the vaccine because there are too many questions about it, to be perfectly honest. You talk to one doctor and they'll say something, you talk to another, they'll say something else. You talk to virologists who actually their research has been focused on viruses and understanding how things are connected and how they latch onto and the DNA and all this stuff, scientific stuff that I don't totally understand. But there again, you have to understand that parents are the ultimate authority. Governor DeSantis signed a piece of legislation to allow that in Florida. Now he has signed an executive order recently that talks about masking. That masking is optional. If parents want their child to be masked in school, then that's their choice. If they don't, then that's their choice. And so this executive order stipulates that school boards shall not mandate mask wearing. So there again, here we go, another round of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? The fear mongers, the unions, Randy Weingarten, sorry to mention her name, but she's the president of the American Federation of Teachers. She has come out, she's flip-flopping now with regards to vaccinations. Teachers must be vaccinated, it must be mandatory, and that, children need to, we need to reconsider closing schools because how many people are going to be vaccinated and are they going to wear masks? And so the unions are trying to drive a lot of this as well, which is anti-parent authority.
And speaking of CDC and flip-flopping, they're not quite clear on masks either, so that's another.
And there's so much to talk about with regards to this. And there again, it needs to boil down to my decision, your decision. What do you think is best for your child? And not what some governor or school board or union has to say about it. Again, I want to reiterate, this is a virus. We have viruses every year in the United States. How many of you go out and get a flu shot every year? The influenza is a virus. We will never get rid of the virus. And now that we have COVID-19 supposedly behind us because of this vaccine that came out, now we have a new variant. What is it, the Delta? The Delta variant. So now we have a new strain, I guess, of coronavirus. And so they want to do the same things that they did previously, which now that we've had time, universities and medical institutions have had time to do some studies and some research, and virologists have been looking at the DNA strands and the viral strands and things like that. And so now there is data to be able to hang your hat on, but CDC continues to be the, quote, premier authority. in the United States, even though they continue to flip-flop, they continue to double back, double down, and continue to want to lock down citizens. And from my perspective, that is taking away your freedom to choose. I find it interesting that there is one issue that the progressives are very keen on keeping choice. My body, my choice. Does that sound familiar? But when it comes to taking a shot, a vaccine, that who knows what effect it's going to have on an individual immediately, a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. We don't know any of that stuff. But my body, my choice isn't good enough for refusing to take the vaccine.
Yeah, I know people myself taking the vaccine that are getting COVID still.
Yes, yes. And there's many articles out there in the media that have identified that. I mean, there was a cruise ship, I think it was, a cruise line that went out. Everybody was vaccinated, but they came back with cases of COVID. So there again, there's no sure cure for this, and until people understand that it is a virus and it's going to affect each of us differently based on our DNA makeup and our medical history and our, what do they call those, pre-existing conditions. We don't know about this vaccine, and I, for one, personally don't think that mandatory vaccines is the way to go. And I definitely don't think that masking children in school is the way to go. Fortunately, here in the county that we live in, masking is optional. And I find it also interesting that when Governor DeSantis stated that if you have a mandatory masking in your school district, you will have state funds withheld from your district. So immediately, almost immediately, 2 districts came out and reversed their mandatory policy. So that really tells you that maybe they're a little bit more concerned about the funding than they are about the safety and health of the children. Just food for thought there. So these are some of the things that I think about, that I write about, that I talk to other people about. So,
do you think we'll see any school closures? Maybe not here in the state of Florida, but possibly other states?
Yes, I do believe that probably New York State, California, Minnesota, Wisconsin, possibly Michigan. I think some of those, even Illinois and Ohio, might possibly have some school closures, or if not school closures, then they'll definitely hopefully they'll open up the virtual option for more parents, to allow them to go ahead and continue with school, even though virtual learning isn't necessarily the best learning environment for a lot of children. It's better than having no instruction and no guidance whatsoever with regards to learning what needs to be learned.
And as we discussed before, with the virtual learning, the parents might actually be a little more involved in what is being taught. So there could be possible good side to that if there is some closures or they do go virtual again.
Yes. Well, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think the best thing that happened to education is the COVID virus. And I mean that in a positive way, because it opened the eyes of parents to see what their children were actually being taught. And the next big issue that's going to really come to the forefront, I don't think critical race is going to die down, but you're going to actually start seeing efforts. We have a lawsuit here in the state of Florida moving forward with regards to curriculum and the sex education that children are receiving, and some of the material is very pornographic in nature. And I'm talking elementary school here as well, folks. So it's not just for high school students, but it's filtering down K-12. So that's something else that parents have woken up to and that they have seen their children being exposed to. And many parents across this country are very angry and very disappointed and are definitely seeking alternatives.
And that sounds like something we should expand on maybe in our next episode.
Yes.
Is these different areas and sex education. You mentioned math and
Civics and history. Curriculums.
Which will continue on into our next episode next month, the third series.
Okay. Sounds good.
Anything more to add to today's series?
Well, I just want to encourage parents to continue to speak up and ask for information. Demand that your school boards, not just your local school boards, but your state school board as well, be transparent with regards to what they're doing. Something that Joy and I talked about before we sat down is state standards. Okay, what do your state standards actually require your children to be taught? It's important. Is it something like, your child must learn to read the ABCs? Well, that's well and good, but how are they going to learn to read the ABCs? Are they going to use phonics? Are they going to use some kind of scope and sequence? Or are they going to leave it up to the classroom teacher to decide on how to do the ABCs? So these are things that parents need to be aware of. They need to continue to stay involved and just continue to fight for that quality. That state constitutions guarantee quality education for all, or some wording to that nature. And it's up to the parents to decide and make sure that that quality education is provided to their children. So I want to hone in on that.
Thank you, parents, for getting out on the
Yes.
school board and saying something about what is being taught. And you can
Most
always
definitely.
ask for the curriculum that's being taught to your children. It might be a fight, but you can ask.
Yes.
Certainly should, as we have seen with that case you were talking about earlier.
Yes, in Rhode Island, there is a mother. Sorry to go on here,
No.
but there's a mother in Rhode Island who started out with her child was going into kindergarten, and she started out asking to see the curriculum, which is reasonable. And so after several correspondence, either face-to-face or email, the principal finally told her that she needed to make a public records request. Well, now it has elevated to the point where the National Education Association is suing the mother because she is asking to see her child's curriculum. Now, this is abominable, and on the news this morning, her lawyer was stating that the NEA doesn't have standing to request that, but from my perspective, it's a way to be out there in the media and try to intimidate parents and shut parents down and stuff. So stand strong, and you are on the right side. It is, you have every right as a parent to see what is being taught to your children.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen, for joining us again on Protecting Our Freedoms podcast and continuing this dialogue on education in crisis.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And all of our podcasts can be viewed on our website, on YouTube, and on Rumble by typing in American Security Council Foundation. Please subscribe to our channel, comment, and share this podcast with your friends and family. If you've liked what you heard today, please consider donating or becoming a member of the American Security Council Foundation. You can go to www.ascf.us, and as I said in the beginning, if you donate $25 or more, we will send you Mark Levin's book on American Marxism. Thank you for joining us today. Please join us again next time as we talk more about protecting your freedoms.